Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to the Asia InsurTech Podcast. We are joined today by Nigel Fellowes-Freeman, the founder and CEO of Kanopi with a K. I like it. Nigel, thank you so much for coming to the show. How are you doing today, by the way?
Do you know what? I'm doing really well. It's a K and an I. So Obi-Wan, the going joke is Obi-Wan Kanopi is sometimes it gets pronounced Kanopi rather than Canopy. But I appreciate the intro and I'm very pleased to be here. Thanks, Michael.
Awesome. Look, before we get into the main part of this conversation, why don't you give a little bit of a self-introduction for us?
Yeah, of course. So, my name is Nigel Fellowes-Freeman. I'm the founder and CEO of Kanopi. Originally from the UK, now living in Melbourne, Australia. Have been doing so for the last almost a decade now. And an entrepreneur at heart, I suppose, in terms of my family will tell you that always asking why was something that they probably got bored of very, very early on. And so,
is that why you moved to the other side of the world? Sorry,
yes,
go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. The family could take no longer accept any of the whys, and so sent me packing as far away as I could possibly get from the UK. But obviously, just then created some companies, done some companies in the UK, and now the founder of Kanopi here, and we're doing trying to help in the insurance space for the last few years.
So what got you involved in insurance? I mean, what about your background? Was there some kind of personal experience? A lot of the guys and the gals that I talk to who do start up insurance companies had something happen to them and they're like, this is something that has to get fixed and I have to do it.
Yeah, like that kind of burning desire, right? The burning hole for me, it was actually when the previous startup I was running. There was this moment where I sat down on like a Thursday or Friday night. I had all of these decisions I was having to make. And I was having to make a bunch of decisions around insurance policies that I knew were really important, but I had absolutely no idea what I should be doing, what policies I should take, what I was going to need protection for today, what I was going to need protection for in the future. And it seemed so bizarre to me that I was trying to make calls about something I knew nothing about, and I had to proactively go and find it and work it out. And I thought, surely I'd experienced some loan experiences in terms of buying a house a few months previous, and I'd seen the advantage of being brought a financial experience embedded inside something else. And that kind of really struck me, which was, if we could do that for an insurance product, if you could bring contextually the right product to me, and I would have to make a decision because contextually it felt right for me at that moment as a small business owner doing a thing, and you got given a product at that point in time, the decision would be much more simple. And so that was really the light bulb of this burning desire that if I felt it, I'm sure many other people did. I went out and the next day spoke to as many folks that I knew as I could, banged on some doors and like, do people feel the same? Like, is it something that everybody else around me feeling, or is it just my naivety? And everyone felt the same. And looking around and looking left and right, it didn't seem like there was anyone really solving the problem. And so that fundamental thing I mentioned earlier on about the whys, I understood that. Why is it, and how can we crack that nut?
Maybe you can explain for people that don't necessarily know like what an embedded financial product actually looks like. Like, it's hard to do, right? Technically, it's hard to do. So there's a lot of technological problems that need to get solved. There are a lot of relevancy problems that need to get solved. Like, explain how that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the reason that it hadn't happened, because it's a really hard thing. And it's hard in a number of ways, which is technologically, it's hard because how do you build the infrastructure to work with multiple third parties to bring complex product like insurance into a different experience? And so that's kind of a technical complexity. But if we take a step back for that and say, okay, like what is embedded? A lot of folks who have been in the insurance value chain for a long time, affinity is something that everyone's heard of. It's how can you do a standard referral relationship, which is, I know you have a group of customers and you'd like to offer them an insurance product. And so you refer it to somebody else. And I think that was probably, you could call that maybe embedded 0.5, maybe something like that in terms of a very first small iteration of it. But really the premise of how an embedded insurance product works, it has to have a trigger point. So it has to have a moment of need for a customer. And then it has to be contextual. You have to deliver the right product to the customer embedded inside another service. And so say you are, Tesla's a nice example, which is out there today. Obviously, Tesla now have embedded insurance inside of their cars. So you get in your car today, drive your Tesla in some parts of the US, and your car is insured, and dynamically it kind of changes the insurance as you're driving around your Tesla. And so all of a sudden, versus you buying a new car, going home, having to go online and purchase a new insurance policy, all of a sudden the insurance is embedded inside the asset or the service that you're taking on. And that's really the crux of it. How can you bring the insurance product to the asset or service that you're trying to protect against?
Can I ask you this? Like, are there other companies out there that are doing this? Right there, and actually, there's some really big companies out there that are doing this now that were started actually in the same, not in Melbourne per se, but in Australia, if I remember correctly. Like, it's kind of a ballsy move to go out and start a company in the embedded space to kind of do, because again, it's a huge technical problem. And is there a benefit to being like second mover, third mover in this case?
Yeah, good question. And I think if you probably talk about Cover Genius, the folks that have come out of this market, and Cover Genius are doing a great job, and they've approached it in a slightly different way. And I think if you look globally, and well, let's just try Cover Genius for a little while. Cover Genius have taken an approach of being full stack. And so they are a full service MGA. So they do everything from selling the product through to servicing, through to claims. So they are the company that sells and services the insurance, and they deliver that in an embedded way. When we took a look at that, we thought that actually there's a lot of carriers, a lot of the big guys, a lot of the big end of town that want to get into this space, haven't been able to because they've got technical, cultural, operational challenges with their legacy infrastructure and architecture that just says it's really hard for them to get into this market. And so we took a view on, actually, let's be the enabler here. We can just be the technology layer. We don't want to be the full stack MGA. We're not going to be the folks that sell you the insurance, but we're going to be the technology layer that enables any insurance carrier or an MGA in the world to take on this embedded challenge. Because we do believe if you look at all of the data from a McKinsey or Bain or any of those kind of folks, the penetration of this kind of delivery could call it maybe 30-35% of global GWP over the next decade. And so we think it's going to be a really, really meaningful channel, and we want to be the way that unlocks it for the world.
So there are two sides to this, it seems like to me, right? One is on the insurer side, where you go to the insurers and you enable them to provide this embedded insurance. They don't have to build it themselves, right? Which again, we've already stressed is technically hard to do. Mm. But on the other side, like, I feel like every company should be their own media company. I've spoken about this a lot, right? And again, they don't know how to do it. So I provide that service to them by helping them do it, because for them to build what I've built is nearly impossible. So kind of the same thing. But on the flip side, you have to then convince them that they need to be their own insurance company in a way, right? Because I think the other opportunity here, and tell me where I'm wrong, is that, like, I don't know, whoever the biggest gym provider is in Australia or the biggest gym service provider in Thailand, they should also have embedded insurance. Like, when you get a membership, you get some sort of health insurance or physical protection insurance. How do you convince them that they should do it as well? And how hard is it for them to integrate?
Yeah, really good question. I think to your point around every brand, every company should be a media company. There's a really good article that was written by Andreessen and Horowitz. It's probably 5 or 6 years ago now. That was called the default insurance opportunity, and really it just talked about how their belief is every company in the world become a financial services business. And the premise of that is we believe the same. But there's a couple of things to enable it. First of all, it's got to be simple. It's got to be easy. It's never going to be the core capability of those businesses to become an insurance company. They don't want to take on a regulatory burden. They don't really want to take on a technology burden. They want to focus on what they're good at. But what you have seen is a real explosion of the ecosystem. And so in 20, 30 years ago, those single product companies have became two-sided marketplaces and now are becoming ecosystems. And that's not just in the technical side of the world, but that's also in the restaurant business or in the health business in gyms. And so if you can allow a way for a carrier to build and have these products available, and on the distribution side, then allow these platforms, brands, companies to simply add more value to their customers, but it has to be contextual. A gym selling you travel insurance makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
But a gym selling you health insurance does make sense. And so,
or accident insurance, right? Like if somebody drops a weight on your head when you're weightlifting, yeah.
Any of those kinds of things, right? Contextual is super, super key. And if you can make it simple for both sides, then there's a really great opportunity. And I think that's what I think the opportunity, not just us aside, but globally in terms of simplifying the insurance journey for customers, which is a fundamental important thing here. If you can do that, then I think there's opportunity to grow.
So you know that I've had like hundreds and almost thousands of conversations about insurance over the past like 5 or 6 years. We'll talk about your podcast when the show is towards its end as well, because I think it's important to mention it. But in the other shows that I do, because I do other shows too, I do talk to people that are building platforms, not just in Asia, but even in India. And, some of these platforms can have 200, 300, 400,000 people on them. And I always ask them, why don't you have this natural distribution mechanism built into your company? Have you considered selling insurance as well? Right? Because here's the opportunity looks like to me, particularly in a country like India, where penetration is low and it's the largest population in the world, right? So the opportunity is huge. Do you talk to those platform businesses as well? Even the ones that have no kind of finance related to them? Because the ones that do, like if you're a payment company, you should have an insurance part of your business too. But I mean, I was talking to a guy who was building a company just to help influencers get more followers kind of thing. And I was like, dude, you have 400,000 people on the platform. Shouldn't you have insurance? Are you having these conversations as well?
Yeah, I think when you are looking at the adoption curve, I think you've got to look at the adoption curve of those early adopters. If you think about that standard curve of who's kind of coming first, really, you need the early adopters. You need the folks that have some sense of visibility, some sense of a desire and an understanding of what it means to them. And then you'll kind of get like continued adoption by maybe folks you haven't considered. And maybe to give you a little bit more color on that.
Please.
Because insurance has been poorly sold and poorly experienced for a long time, sometimes the jump from this is my beautiful experience, this is my beautiful product, why do I want to put something that historically has been a really bad experience into my product? And so in terms of there's a mental model of how insurance has been sold historically. And so like there isn't a simple jump to go, actually, this can be done beautifully. And so actually it makes sense for it to come into my product. And so I think that's where the education piece sits, which is it needs to be seen to be believed. It needs to be seen to go, actually, I had this experience in something in my life, and now I should bring it into my product. I think there's a missing piece there.
So this is a really good point, though. And you said earlier, it's got to be simple and easy, right? In other words, if I want to put an insurance product into my product, and let's say I've had a great experience using Kanopi, like I literally should just be able to drag and drop a button inside of it, maybe have a little bit of text to make it like contextual, as you said, and then it just works, right? What do you do as Kanopi? Like, what are some of the things you've done to make this really simple?
That onboarding experience is like absolutely critical for a distributor in terms of as a platform. So how can they take a injectable widget, take a piece of snippet of code, put it into their site, and then allow them to be kind of up and running within weeks, if not days? That's critical, because if you do that, then you start to then get some penetration. But I would just add to that is once you get over that very simplistic hurdle of going, then all of the data suggests that the more tightly integrated the service is to the platform, the better. And there's a couple of ways that you do that, which is really an important piece is data sharing. And so if you can share data between the platforms to change the customer experience, and here at Kanopi, we call that kind of N=1. How can you Netflix the experience? How can every customer have a different experience based on what you know about them? Then all of a sudden you feel like the insurance experience is made for you. And that is really, really important. If you can think about you're a carpenter and you're going through a journey, and it's got imagery of carpentry, it speaks to you as a tradie, it got all of these pieces, very small but important, make it feel like the service knows what you need. That's really important and makes a very, very big difference in both conversion and giving the customer the right product.
But are you suggesting that Kanopi also builds that personalization level, right? Because again, you said earlier, you're not full stack. I get it. You don't want to be an MGA. You don't want to do all that work. That makes sense to me. You want to be the enabler here. But there's a lot of stuff going on, right? Because once you start talking about data sharing, which is super important, right? Particularly when it comes to personalization or even micro personalization, right? Like you said, I may be a carpenter, the next guy may be a plumber, and our experience should be completely different. How do you build that into the stack so that it's just easy to do?
Yeah, you have to do it from the bottom up. And we were fortunate that we took a very fundamental data approach to the platform from day one. And that's meant that we can really build a data profile of a customer. And everything that you see around the edges is then dynamic based on what we know about a customer. So the images you see, the forms you see, what questions you see, all of those pieces are all completely dynamic based on the data model that we know about a customer. And so that's how we do that. Is we've been fortunate that we've got some great engineers that I'm very, very proud of, and the hard work that they do every day to build a platform that has the nuance and dynamism to be able to kind of change and adapt to different customers. Because I suppose to your point, we pointed a little earlier on about what Affinity kind of 0.5 and 1.0 was, that was really a form. It was a digital form. You got referred into a digital form that was the same for everybody else. And so rather than you completing a PDF that had a bunch of fields on it that you printed out and posted off, that form got put online. But really, you have to step a long way past that to really change an embedded experience. And the next step past that is it being integrated into the service itself. And so you pay $15 for your bank account, and as part of your bank account, you have cyber insurance with it. And so these kinds of things were actually all of a sudden is then included in the service versus an add on top. Then is that next stage of how you really change the insurance experience for customers.
How big is your tech team?
We've got about almost 20 folks now in terms of engineering, all based out here in Melbourne today.
That's a lot of people. Are you funded as well?
Yeah, look, we've been fortunate. We've been fortunate to have some fantastic support. We've got some both local support, but global support. Some of the likes of one of our big strategic investor is Fairfax Financial from over in Canada. They're a big supporter of us, as well as some kind of more traditional VCs over here in Australia. And so we've managed to build a group of folks that believe, both from a financial perspective, but also, as you know, insurance domain expertise is really important. And it's really important in decision making, not just on the financial side of the business, but also strategically in terms of how do you build the right product for our customers, and having shareholders that are aligned with that was very important to us.
Yeah, it's super important, right? Because you can have all this technological experience, but if you don't understand the ins and outs and the nuances and intricacies of the insurance market, it's going to be hard to compete at the end of the day. Is there an artificial intelligence and machine learning aspect going on here as well? And how does that kind of fit into all the products that you're building?
Yeah, good question. So the answer is yes. And I'm pleased to say we've been doing it for a while versus maybe just adding an LLM business in the last year or so. So kind of how we thought about this, this.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Because I love the fact you're just so dismissive about people that are just, hyping up the LLM part of their business. This happens. You know this. You're old enough to know that, like, 4 years ago, there was, Michael Metaverse Waste. And then it's like everybody was into big data. Like, the people are just changing and changing and changing. So I love the fact that you're like, yeah, we were onto this before other people were onto it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I think actually, to be fair to the insurance business, there's been a lot of AI on the more traditional side, the more machine learning side within the insurance value chain for a very long time. I think. And so from that perspective, when we think about, I'll mention a bunch of the dynamism of the front end in terms of how things are served. There's a lot of kind of machine learning that sits behind that in terms of traditional machine learning around how you serve different things to different customers based on what we know about them and what general profiles are, et cetera. But I suppose what I would say that we have kind of started to extend the platform over the last kind of maybe 18 months or so, because a key part of, as you know, when you're trying to deliver new products and then give the transparency back to the carriers around what's actually happening, it seemed very apparent to us that actually it was really hard to make changes. When you look at more legacy systems, when they're trying to make portfolio optimization, actually having a transparency into how the portfolio is performing. But then once you knew, then making changes to a system to be able to actually take advantage of that or change profiles or ratings or relativity, all those kind of different components was really hard. And so we're going through a journey right now, which is how can a BA, a non-technical person who's looking at a portfolio, how can they understand what parts of the system are performing, which parts are not, by asking natural language questions of an element of the system. And then, so we're getting pretty good at that. And the next step for us is then how can we then automatically make change? And so maybe you're coming towards Christmas and you want your user experience to have a Christmas feel to it. How can the BA just put in a request in natural language to make changes to the product, and then the experience change based on that? And so that's kind of where we're heading in terms of making sure we, A, have the transparency of understanding, but then B, how do you then impact the changes within the platform for you and your customers?
Super interesting stuff. I mean, I could spend all day talking about artificial intelligence because I use it every single day to do my job as well. Do you talk to people when you're not selling the product, but when you're trying to convince them that this idea of embedded insurance is going to be good for their business? Again, getting back to this conversation we were having earlier, it's also like another revenue stream for them as well, right? Do you see changes in their attitude when people actually start using these embedded products and they feel like, well, wait a second, we were making money off the gym. I'm just going to go back to that example. But now we're making money off of the insurance products as well. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I think revenue generation is one component of it. So I'd say really with the conversations we have with those partners are probably three-pronged. The first one is increased revenue, so net new customers. How can you attract a new customer that wasn't going to come to your gym before, but now they see as part of your gym, part of the package, they get this insurance part as part of their subscription. So net new customers. Then you've got the current customers that you're kind of generating more gross revenue from. So kind of generating more revenue from current customers. And then the final piece is like all the data suggests retention just goes through the roof. So the more services you attach to a single customer, retention really, really improves. And so they're really the three prongs that we understand from the partners that we work with and the platforms and the services, the gyms that we work with. They get pretty excited because all of a sudden they see this compounding revenue stream that has net increase and they have more retention. And so in all parts of above the line, it gets pretty interesting for them.
I like it. It's a great story. You talked a little bit about it, building this collaborative ecosystem, insurance ecosystem. What does this look like to you going forward? Like, what does it look like over the next 3 to 5 years? What's the vision for this?
I think the vision for me is pretty clear in that if you can build a marketplace that has the best carriers in the world, that have the best products and wordings in the world to perfectly protect customers, and you can attract on the other side the biggest brands, platforms, and businesses in the world to perfectly embed the right insurance products into their customer experiences. The grand vision here is we all know that the protection gap is growing. We know that customers are getting less and less protection of what they actually need, doubling over the last kind of decade or so. The grand vision for us is how do we reduce that gap? How do we get the right customers who need protection that they need, where and when they need it? And all of the technology pieces in the marketplace and having the right carriers and the distribution partners, all of those are the pieces. But the grand vision, really, the purpose of what we're doing, that why me and the team get out of bed every day and grind away to try and kind of change the world, is like, how do we allow those customers that don't currently have access to these products to get the right protection? And if we can reduce that percentage from 20% down to 15, down to 10%, I think then that will be a success for us as a business.
What is and it's a good vision to have, right? And very noble. Because you're right. I mean, all the conversations that I'm having right now about this protection gap is that it's getting bigger. Premiums are going up, protection's going down, and it's a real problem actually for the industry as a whole. Talk to me about what the impact of embedded insurance has on just like the traditional broker model, right? In other words, what's going to happen to brokers if everything gets embedded?
Yeah. So I think one of the previous company I was in the accounting space, and the same narrative was there as it is in the insurance space, which is accountants are going to die. No one's going to need an accountant. All the cloud accounting platforms are going to do everything that an accountant does for them, and similarly with a bookkeeper. And I think we see that the same within the insurance world, which is brokers are going to get eradicated by these digital experiences and by embedded. And I think when you think about product complexity, there will always be a need for the more complex product. And I say always is a very strong word.
I think you're 100% right, actually. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, for a long time, there's going to be a need for advice-based services that the more complex needs. And that takes nuance and understanding of business and understanding of the character and understanding of how they want to do things. And that relationship gets built between an advisor and a customer. And I would just to add to that, actually, on my pod a few weeks ago, we had a broker on, and I asked her this exact question. And she calls herself let me make sure I get this term correct. It was a risk advisor, not a broker. And the reason she changed that terminology was because broker brought into your mind that all they did was try to get you the cheapest price. And what her position was, no, we don't do that. We are in the game of trying to mitigate risk for you. And that's how we add value. You don't add value just by going out to 7 carriers and bringing you the cheapest product. We add value by understanding your business and trying to mitigate risk. And so I think that's where embedded will sit in terms of like transaction, high volume, across a really broad range of product lines. But where the advisor sits is really that exact word. How do they add advice and mitigate risk for the customer? And I think there's a really, really big space for them there.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to insure or protect a fleet of airplanes by just like clicking on a button at the point of purchase from Boeing or from Airbus. I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
And I will say this, when I was at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, right, they provided insurance like most big American companies do. And to be honest, I had no idea what my coverage was. None. And there was nobody to ask, really. And for the first time in my life, I think at the beginning of 2023, if you can believe that, maybe 22, I can't remember anymore, I actually bought my first health insurance. And I spent a ton of time with the woman from the insurer who helped me do it. And she was great. I would definitely call her a risk advisor, because she was like, people that are your age and in your category that do the thing that you do, you usually do this thing because of this reason. And I'm like, that's great to know. Right. And I'm like, how much coverage do I need for this and that? And I would never going to be able to do that by myself. Never. So I agree. I think it's great. And I will also say this, Nigel, I'm old enough to know, and I've seen many, many sort of technological cycles, right? Every time something new comes along, it's meant to replace somebody's job and put like millions of people out of work. And historically, it's just never happened. Never. You can't show me one great example of it. You may say, and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, well, didn't the car put the horse and buggy driver out of a job? No, that guy just learned how to drive and became a taxi driver.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just never works that way. Anyway, before we go, I want to talk a little bit about your podcast. What's it called?
Yes.
Why do you do it? How's it going?
Yeah, so the pod started because I was having conversations just like this, Michael. Every single day I was having very interesting conversations with with very interesting folks across the industry, and everyone had something interesting to say. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we can try and break down some barriers and have like good, authentic conversations with a bunch of really interesting folks, and versus them just being between me and that person, put them out there in the world for some content to be consumed. And so that's kind of what we went about. We started just doing the one or two, and then all of a sudden we got some great feedback. And so now the backlog is long, as I'm sure it is for the show. Sure it is for yours as well. Yeah, we really, really enjoy it. You should check it out. The Future Insurer is a really, really interesting pod with some interesting folks. And so yeah, I'd recommend checking it out.
I do think it's kind of cool that the outgrowth of this is because you were sitting around having these really great conversations with people Look, I think that the insurance industry is going through this really great transformation, but I don't think it's not this thing that happens overnight. Right? Like we've been doing this show for over 5 years, and I don't run out of people to talk to because as technology advances, as the business changes, as the world evolves, the conversations just get more and more interesting, right? And to be fair, when we started our show, you didn't have Kanopi, right? So now that you're here doing stuff, the stuff that you've learned and the background that you have that you take into the insurance industry, again, just makes the conversation so much more interesting, right? Because you're coming at it from a different perspective. And I'm sure you're seeing that on your show as well.
How many shows are you up to, Michael? What was the number?
For the Asia InsurTech Podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, God. I don't know, over 300?
Wow. 300. There you go. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also we do something called InsurTech Amplified too, right? To talk to people outside of Asia. And in that, I think we've done 50 or so. The Asia Tech Podcast, we've done over 300 as well. Like I've probably done 2,000 to 3,000 recordings in the last like 6 or 7 years. And you're right. It's just the stuff that you get to learn, Nigel, just from talking to really interesting people. It's super cool. And I love this idea of we should have just recorded that, right?
Yeah.
Because we would have had this conversation anyway. And if you and I bumped into each other in a coffee shop in Melbourne, and I was like, what do you do? And you're like, I do this Kanopi thing. I would have been like, whoa. And we probably would have sat there for 2 hours having a conversation about embedded insurance, just like we already did. Yeah.
And we just get the beauty of it is we get to record it. We get to share it with the world. There'll be opinions. We'll get to learn what other people's opinions are. But the nuance of the thing you mentioned a little bit earlier on today around every company should build a brand, and we're fundamental believers in that. I think if you it's the only way you can control the narrative is to have the narrative yourself. And so I think every brand, every business in the world should think about how they can turn themselves into a media business and allow them to share just authentic conversations that they have within the business.
I agree. And look, most public relations, most PR historically has been defensive, right? So the CEO of a company gets caught doing something bad, and then the PR team kind of jumps on the defense. My feeling is if you're telling a story about yourself and about your company and about your business just on a constant basis, for somebody to come in and tell the opposing story is going to be really hard because there's all this other stuff out there in the ether that helps you tell your story. And I think that's what you're saying as well. Okay, look, I don't want to keep you any longer. Nigel Fellowes-Freeman, the founder and CEO of Kanopi. What's the name of your podcast again?
The Future Insurer.
The Future Insurer. Everybody should listen to it, subscribe to it. Nigel, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Michael, thank you so much. Thanks for your time.